Hey, and welcome into another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, Drew Landry, and in today's episode, I'm going to get into just a little bit about the Texas Senate race between incumbent Ted Cruz and challenger Congressman Colin Allred. And in today's episode, as you can see, I'm doing a video here, and for those who are listening through the podcast, listening audio capabilities, well, you're missing out on some visuals that I'm going to give you here, and you're always welcome to check this out straight from the Substack site, or you can check it out on YouTube there by just doing a quick search for the Outsider Podcast on YouTube. Okay? That said, and with that out of the way, hopefully you'll want to subscribe to the Outsider Podcast. I say all that and then I do another short little promo. If you'd like to subscribe to the Outsider Podcast, do that on YouTube, do that on your Apple Podcasts, do that on Spotify. Hit that subscribe bell, and you'll always be able to get a new episode. You won't ever have to look for it or anything like that. It'll just automatically come onto your phone or your computer or wherever you get your podcasts. That's where I would be. That said, let's get into what I wanted to talk about here. And before I do get heavy into it, I want to give you just a little snippet of a podcast that I like to listen to. A friend of mine, friend of the show, and a couple of reporters that I really respect and really think do a great job of covering Texas politics is Scott Braddock from the Quorum Report and also the Houston Chronicles, Jeremy Wallace. They have a podcast called the Texas Take, and they do an interesting take, I guess you could say, and analysis on the debate that we heard from Senator Cruz and from Congressman Allred. And so I'm going to play you just a snippet of that, and then we'll get into what I wanted to talk about as we go forward here. So just a little snippet from their latest episode.
Scott, you also say it's interesting that this debate is on a Tuesday. Why does that even matter?
Well, historically, in modern Texas politics, and I mean historically since we've had television, the incumbent Republican wants to have the debate on Friday night when high school football is happening, and nobody really notices the debate. The fact that this is the only debate in this race that's going to be televised and the only time these guys are going to be on stage together, and Senator Cruz agreed to have it on a Tuesday, means that he wants as many people to see this as possible. His campaign must believe that they still have a lot of work to do to try to grab those independents, and a setting like this is where to do it. So they're trying to do a few things, Jeremy. They want to reach those independents, but also fire up the base. And I think, Cruz is trying to do that more than Allred, who's trying to do more outreach to Republicans. There are different versions of what they're trying to do. So during the debate, let's get into it. Cruz is just slamming Allred on one thing after another. You might have thought that he would try to look at least kind of likable, but that's not possible. For Cruz, that's not possible. So he's gonna do what he does. And I would say this right off the top. I would say Allred probably beat expectations for how energetic he might appear and all of that. How he might try to get sort of in Cruz's face. Because before the debate, I had also said on another broadcast that his personality in most settings is kind of like watching paint dry, right? So there's a low bar. So he beat expectations. Cruz just he is who we know him to be, and that's who he was in this debate, right? So he's slamming Allred on one thing after another. First thing, border security.
Congressman Allred has said publicly, if you believe border security matters, he thinks you're a racist. He calls the border wall, quote, that racist border wall, and he has pledged to tear down that racist border wall personally.
He also took him to task on the economy.
Congressman Allred takes no responsibility for his own voting record, takes no responsibility for the trillions in spending that have driven inflation, takes no responsibility for the war on Texas energy and LNG and oil and gas.
He also said the idea that Allred is a bipartisan leader is simply bogus.
But I got to say, there's something Congressman Allred says that he says all the time. He says this independent group rated him the most bipartisan member of the Texas delegation. And I got to say, I found that quite odd. So I went and looked at this group. Because how can someone who votes 100% with Nancy Pelosi, which is what he did his first 4 years, how can he be bipartisan? How can Colin Allred? Colin Allred voted 100% with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris their first 2 years in office. How could he be called the most bipartisan member? And then I discovered this group. Its board consists of a bunch of Democrat donors. They say on their website, we don't look at votes. We don't examine every vote. So he can vote. He votes exactly like Nancy Pelosi.
So he says that Allred votes exactly like Nancy Pelosi. In a lot of his social media posts, Jeremy, I saw Cruz saying that Allred is Kamala Harris. Do you think he did any damage to Allred with this line of attack?
Well, yeah, he even said it during the debate. You know, my favorite line of the night from Ted Cruz was, understand at home, Colin Allred is Kamala Harris. You know, their records are the same. You know, it's like there's a reason he's doing that. And this kind of goes back to his criticism of Mitch McConnell, all right? You know, follow along here. So that super PAC he was criticizing McConnell for not sharing money with is still doing a lot of research in this campaign. And what they discovered is that, you know, not a surprise to anybody, Ted Cruz's negatives are really high. They're super high. It's like,
people don't like it.
Yeah, but as many people, you know, support him as don't like him. You know, it's like it's almost an even split, and that's not where you want to be as a candidate. But with Colin Allred, his numbers aren't there, right? You know, it's like his numbers, like while there's a huge people who just don't have an opinion of him, still his negatives, you know, at one point were just in the 20s, you know, which is really low for a candidate. It's up to in the 30s, according to Mitch McConnell's super PAC, and so that sets the stage. And I'm absolutely sure, you know, Cruz's numbers tell you the same thing, right? He knows that too. That's why he has to go super negative. He's got to attach every negative feeling every Texan has about Nancy Pelosi or Kamala Harris or George Soros, you name the list, Chuck Schumer. Give me the worst sounding, you know, Democrat you can and try to morph it into Colin Allred, because he's got to get those negatives higher, because he needs people in the middle, those people, those independent, moderate type people who might be thinking, oh, Colin Allred's not bad, I'll be okay with him. He's got to get them thinking, no, he will destroy the state of Texas. And you saw, like, immediately after the debate, where does, you know, Ted Cruz go? He goes out west. He goes to Amarillo, Lubbock, Midland, making the same case to super Republican areas, saying, you've got to get out the vote and help me to keep basically Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, George Soros, and again, anybody you want to throw in that list from getting into office. He's got to make, you know, Colin Allred the most unpalatable person, you know, that Texans ever seen. You know, it's kind of, you saw him do it with Beto too.
Well, yeah, I mean,
in this case,
tried and
Allred,
true attack.
He's behind the dime on this with Colin Allred. He like in that.
So there you heard Houston Chronicles Jeremy Wallace just a moment there, and then the other one Scott Braddock, who's the host. I mean, these two guys do a really good job of analyzing this, and as you can see here from the screen, is that I pulled the audio from the Houston Chronicles website. I want to give credit where it needs to be done, so no one can feel that I'm ripping anybody off or anything like that. But it's interesting that they talk about here that they're ringing the bells, that Cruz is ringing the bell, because he's got to make people in Lubbock, in Amarillo, in Midland, Odessa, Wichita Falls, Abilene, San Angelo, those particular areas, Tarrant County, you know, Monroe County, all these very solid Republican areas. He's got to make it sound like he is so far behind. He is so out of the race. He has to have their support. They got to get out to vote. And that's the reason you heard him say those things in that debate with Allred, is that he was playing to a particular crowd. All right, he was playing this same fiddled song that he knows so well to play, is that that the Democrat, no matter who it is suddenly like almost like Karl Marx, is Vladimir Lenin, is Bernie Sanders, is Nancy Pelosi, is Joe Biden, is Kamala Harris. I mean, just all the people who would be negatively seen in any sort of light from the Panhandle down to the Conch Valley. That's what that Democrat is, and there's not an ounce of good in them. They're automatically evil, and you can't vote for them, and you can't stay home. I got to have your support in this. And so it's an interesting thought, and it's been an ongoing play that Republicans have done for a very long time, and it's been a successful game plan. They've been doing it for forever, and well, Republicans have been winning since for about 30 years now, at least statewide. So when we think about this sort of game plan, and whenever Ted Cruz went on the beaten path about calling Allred as Nancy Pelosi, and this whole Finkel as Einhorn thing is such a tried and true game plan, not only to get people to vote, but also to get people to donate money to Cruz. So that's the duopoly there, is that he's saying that how much money he doesn't have because of the turtle, Mitch McConnell, which, he probably would say that. I don't have any money. Please donate to me. I'm being outspent by Allred and the George Soros and all the other, wackadoodles on the left. I need your money, and then go out and vote. So that's, he's serving two masters there. And that's the reason that you heard him go full on red meat issues with the transgender thing, with, talking about the inflation and border security. Those big issues are playing into the Republican side of politics to get those people out to vote. And the Allred campaign has been rather interesting in what their strategy has been, is that it hasn't been so much about what O'Rourke did. Now, these are two different candidates with two different styles of campaigning. All right, let's just be honest about that. O'Rourke was all about going all throughout the state of Texas and going on all 254 counties, and it seemed like he was knocking on everyone's door to try to get him out to vote. And in 2018, this is what happened. This is the breakdown here as to what you saw. And this was the I'm going to scroll down so you can see the counties here. Red for O'Rourke. I'm sorry, red for Cruz, blue for O'Rourke, and then you have Neil Diekman, who got not even 1% of the vote. That said, this is also an interactive map where I can show you how the Republicans win Texas almost every single time. Since this is a statewide seat, there is no gerrymandering here, so you can't gerrymander a state. But let's just be clear as to how good O'Rourke was the first time around. He's able to win Tarrant County, which is, Fort Worth, and this was the hotbed of conservatism for the Republicans, and such a big win for them. And let me see if I can't scroll down just a little more here so you can see this there we go. And he was able to win it by about 3,000 votes, a little more than 3,000 votes, and that was in Tarrant County. Able to dominate. O'Rourke was able to dominate there in Dallas County, able to dominate in Austin, in Travis County, and then able to flip a couple other interesting suburb areas there of Travis County, which was Hayes County here, and then also Williamson County up to the north of them. And here, and then you have South Texas, which has been a stronghold for Democrats for a very long time. What else is interesting is how well O'Rourke was able to do it. Again, we're talking 2018 here in Bexar County. And so, prevents Cruz from winning 40%. So with all these big city areas going for O'Rourke, how was Cruz able to win? How was O'Rourke able to lose this race? Well, let's understand something here. You're seeing something of Cruz being denied about 40% of the vote, and now we get into Harris County, which is the largest county in Texas. O'Rourke needed to win this by like 62 to 38. He needed to deny Cruz 40% of the vote. And in 2018, he wasn't able to really do that. Cruz was able to get a little more, 41% of the vote, more that north of 40% in Harris County, able to also get north of that in Fort Bend County. Let's also note what else he was able to really do here. Dominate in all these other red counties. I'm just going to come down here. This is a county that panhandles. This is Tom Green County. And O'Rourke couldn't even get 30% of the vote. We come up to Amarillo in Potter County. only able to get maybe 31% of the vote. We come out here to East Texas in Cass County here with maybe 10,000 votes. Then we get to Harrison County with a grand total of maybe 23,000 votes, and Cruz is able to get maybe 72% of the vote there. We come on down here to Tyler County. We get Polk County. These other smaller areas, but let's also go up here to the western portion where we get to Wichita County, where we have about 34,000 people voting, and Cruz is able to get maybe 70% of the vote. Let's move over here to Lubbock County, where we have maybe 89,000, maybe 90,000 people voting here, and Cruz is able to get 64% of the vote. And that is where the victory is going to be. Is they are able to it's these margins, all right? And if you listen to the Texas Take more, you'll hear Wallace and Braddock talk about how these margins of victories are key, because Cruz is able to have a 40%, a north of 40% loss. I'm sorry, north of 40% of the vote in Harris County, and his ability to dominate out here in West Texas and in Central Texas and in East Texas. That secures Republican victories every time. Now, what a lot of consultants and incredibly smart people, I'm not denying anything as to what kind of contribution that they bring out here, is what they'll often say is, well, there's more people living in Dallas, Fort Worth, Bexar County, Travis County, and Houston in the big Texas Triangle than there is in any other place in the state. And that's true. But if that was also true, and if there was this continual domination of Democrats, then you'd have statewide elected Democrats. You don't. And I've just explained what the reasoning is that Republicans like Cruz are able to get at least 40% of the vote and then dominate in West, East, and Central Texas. Let's also look here at the 2022 race here between Abbott and O'Rourke. I have to move my spot down there. This was a little different. Of course, elections are unique, and they're unique. There's different situations going on every time. So we had a whole different race here. I mean, this is another midterm race. In 2018, Donald Trump was the president. Here in 2022, you have Biden as the president, and it's just yes, you have had more people voting, but the excitement from the first time just wasn't quite there. But here you see how O'Rourke came very, very close to winning against Ted Cruz, but here he's not so much able to really stave off Abbott, and Abbott's able to win pretty comfortably a third term. But what else is interesting, I think, again, we're looking right here. I'm going to see if I can't expand this map just a little bit. I'm going to move this over just a little bit here, where we can see what Harris County is able to do. Beto O'Rourke is going to win Harris County. He's going to win the big metroplex areas. There's no question about that. Nobody was saying he was going to lose the metroplexes. Let's also be clear. But the fact that Abbott is able to get almost 45% of the vote is rather amazing. And then when we come up here to a county like Lubbock County, O'Rourke wasn't even able to get 30% of the vote, which that's about 8 points away from where he needed to really be, which is about 8 points away from what he needed in order to secure victory. So when we talk about Republicans winning and we talk about what Cruz's capabilities are in this particular race, we have to remember that those types of things are very much portioned between the margins of victory in the big cities and the gigantic victories that Republicans get in West, East, and Central Texas. So they're able to have they'll lose in the metroplexes. They'll lose in the metroplexes. but they just have to get about 40% of the vote in Harris County and then dominate in the other rural areas. That's been the Republican victory for 30 years, folks. Nothing's changed in that strategy. Now, there's a lot to take away with the ongoing conversation about more people voting, okay, and more people being registered to vote, and that there's been about 2.9 million more people registered to vote in Texas since 2018. That's a great story that Jeremy Wallace brought out there. We have a tremendous amount of people voting here. But what else is interesting? What else has to be stated is the fact that while they're registered, you got to get them out to vote. And yes, there's been a tremendous, and there's no denying this, there's been a tremendous influx of new voters in the Texas Triangle. But what is not being said is whether or not those people are going to go out to vote, and if they're going to vote for Democrats. Okay? So, and let's also note this, I live out here in Lubbock County. Lubbock County was able to add about 4,500 to 5,500 more people to the voter roll in this election cycle since 2024 began. Been about 5,000 to 5,500 people added to the voter roll, bring about 198,000 people registered to vote in Lubbock County. Folks, that is almost 2/3 of the population in the county of Lubbock. All right, that is a tremendous number. How many are going to come out to vote? Well, that's the ongoing question. We have about 18% have early voted so far, and now as I'm recording this, this is the start of day 4 in early voting in the 2024 election. The previous 3 have given us about 35,000 total votes. That's early voting along with the mail-in ballots in Lubbock County alone. And that's about 18% of the registered voters. It's a pretty good start. But we've also noticed how it's been precipitously declining. Day 1 of early voting, you had a little more than 12,000 people here in Lubbock County come out to vote. Day 2, you had a little more than 11,000. And then on day 3, you had about 10,600 show up to vote. So you're seeing a bit of a decline here. Maybe there'll be another steady of 10,000 people show up to vote. Maybe it'll kick up again. But, if it's going to be a very high number, that might be a good thing for Colin Allred. That might be a really good thing for Kamala Harris. But that said, I might be the only one who continues to argue this. As a matter of fact, I think I still am. Is that in order for Democrats to win statewide, you can't forget about west of I-35. And I'm not talking about El Paso, nor am I talking about Presidio County. I'm talking about your Potter County, your Randall County, your Lubbock County, Tom Green, Wichita, and Taylor counties. Those are the ones that I'm talking about. You might say, well, Drew, look, it's good that West Texas has an advocate. That's all fine and good. I appreciate the fact that you bring this up. But, more people live in the metros, man. More people live in the big cities. That's where the big thing has to be. You have to constantly do that. Again, I've said this about 4 times now, and I have to repeat it here. This isn't Illinois. This isn't Pennsylvania. This isn't New York. Okay? The rural vote in Texas is much more stronger than Illinois, than Pennsylvania, than New York. It's just this gigantic red wall that has to be cracked. And it's pretty clear that there isn't much of an interest in investing in anything west of I-35 for the Texas Democratic Party. It's very much a plan for Republicans to constantly try to get more people and their people out to vote. Now, there's lots of ways where that can happen. You try to get candidates on the lower end to try to carry the higher end's water. The one that has really done that out here has been District 15 candidate, Democratic candidate for State Board of Education in Morgan Kirkpatrick. She's really been the one to not only campaign for herself, but also say a few things about Colin Allred, say a few things about Kamala Harris, and tries to really carry that particular water. Whereas Republicans have an easier time of doing that. They're going to take out ads all throughout. I mean, they have been saying, got to vote for me and Donald Trump, me and Ted Cruz, me and so on and so forth. That's been the ongoing thing here, but Democrats don't want to do that. They may not have the money to do it, to be honest, or they may not really have the preparation or the infrastructure to really do that. That's another thing. But let's also note where the state of the race with the Texas Senate is, and here's where we are. There's been a poll that was released today. It was added today. Well, I guess since I'm recording this on the 24th, it was added yesterday on the 23rd, that shows a very tight race between Allred and Cruz. Interesting here, as it's from Emerson College, and I have the questionnaire that I'll show you here. It's pretty interesting as to what they asked and how this was done. And I think this is worth our time to really just spend just a couple of minutes to kind of look over here. Here you see, just right here, let me move this over just a little bit more. Sorry, folks, there who's watching the video version. It says, if the Senate, this was a question to respondents. If the U.S. Senate election were held today, would you vote for Democrat Colin Allred or Republican Ted Cruz? Of the 815 likely voters who were answering this question, you had 393, which is 48.3%, say Ted Cruz. 381, which is about 47%, 46.8 if you want to be more exact, say Colin Allred. There's about 5% that's undecided here. So this race is as incredibly razor thin as it's going to be. This is pretty amazing as to how close this race is. It's pretty interesting, though, also, is that when they were asked about who they would vote between the Vice President Harris and former President Trump, those same respondents, it seems like to me that you actually had a Trump Allred voter. And Matt McCowiak out of Travis County has said, who are these people? I want to see them. Why in the world? How can you be one or the other? Because you just could be. I mean, that you want to get into voter behavior, that's a whole different conversation. But that said, it's pretty interesting that Ted Cruz has this issue with himself. And here's a portion of me when I was on the Lubbock talk show called Talking Points with it airs on KAMC called KMAC. And here I am with host Jim Phillips about to talk about something here. So
Democrats will tell you is that Colin Allred needs your vote. That Colin Allred, who's running against Senator Ted Cruz, been some recent polling to suggest it's incredibly close between those two.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Does Cruz ride the coattails of President Trump to secure a third term, or will there be some sort of repel against that?
Which Mr. Allred would be the first statewide Democrat in Texas in 30 years.
That's right.
Which is wild to think about. But markets himself as a more moderate candidate,
right,
which has gotten some of those undecided or at least disenfranchised voters.
Yeah.
Maybe they were registered, never went to the polls because
Right.
they had to register in government class or whatever it was, and they never went. But a candidate like Colin Allred, who is more moderate, seems to be kind of propelling that group in particular to the polls. So this could be really interesting. It's a very different race from Beto Cruz.
That's exactly right. And two different candidates is Allred and O'Rourke. just different styles, just different campaigns, just all of that.
Yeah.
But what is really interesting is, and this is a Ted Cruz problem he has to address, and he's trying to. But Ted Cruz makes this race close. I mean, his personality, his governing style, the way that he deals with things, it just rubs people the wrong way.
It does. It rubs people the wrong way. Ted Cruz just simply has a Ted Cruz problem. And I think that's the essence as to why this race is as close as it is. Allred has a different as I said, there is just campaigning differently than what we've seen from O'Rourke. It's like the classic Democratic campaign style. But I think it's particularly interesting in that it hasn't really reached West Texas, and you're finding people voting that way because he's a Democrat. Does he need to be knocking on doors, and does he need to be out here in West Texas, trying to campaign as much as possible? Look, we'll see what fruit bears. Come election day, come after election day. Maybe he's had the right plan the entire time. Maybe everyone who has told me, West Texas is not. It doesn't matter that much. Maybe they'll be right. Whatever the case may be, we're going to find out. But I've always had this hunch that Lubbock is the bellwether county of Texas. Now that's going to get some laughs out of people, and they're going to throw egg at me. But let me tell you what I mean here. 38% of the vote is what Democratic candidates need in order to flip the entire state, presuming everything stays the same. Okay, so if that voter turnout is not incredibly high for Cruz, meaning he doesn't get 65, 66, 67% of the vote, if he just wins Lubbock County 60-40 and everything stays the same, Texas has just elected its first Democrat in 30 years. Pretty wild. All right, folks, that's this week's podcast. I did a little variation here with some video. Might do some more of that. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again very, very soon.